All right, so in order for us to find the slope of a line, we need to do two things. The first thing that we need to do is we need to start out by finding perfect points. So perfect points are a point along our line, our diagonal line right here, that intersect both the vertical and horizontal grid lines of our graph. So I can see right here that we have a perfect point right there. So I'm going to go ahead and put a dot to let myself know that there's a perfect point there. And then as I follow along this line, I can see that I've got another perfect point right here. And I can go back the other direction. I can see some other perfect points. I've got one right there, and I've got one right there, and I've got another one all the way down here. So I've got 5 different perfect points here. Now, if I'm going to find the slope of this line, I can use any set of those perfect points. So I'm going to choose the 2 that I see that are the closest. And there's lots of pairs that are the closest. I've got my one down here on the bottom and another one right there. Those 2 are close. This pair up here is also the same distance apart. So I'm just going to go ahead and use those ones just because we can choose any pair, and as long as we make sure we simplify everything, we're going to get the same answer. So I've chosen those 3 perfect points, and now in order to calculate the slope, I'm going to need to draw the slope triangle. And in order to draw that slope triangle, I'm going to start out with my first point, and I'm going to go ahead and draw along those grid lines, and I'm going to make a triangle from my first point to my second point. So now that I've drawn that triangle, I can go ahead and start to find my slope. So I remember that my formula for slope is m equals rise over run. Now, the rise is the amount that's going up and down, and then the run is side to side. So now I just need to figure out on this triangle, how much did I go up and down, and how much did I go side to side. So I'm going to go ahead and count. I'm going to start with my first point, and I can see that I went up 2 units, so my rise was 2. So then on the top of my fraction, I can go ahead and just write 2. And then my run, the side to side movement, I've got 1, 2, 3. So I can put 3 in place of my run. So the slope of this line is 2/3. Now, looking over at the next problem, I need to also find the slope of this line. And looking at this, before I even do anything, I can see a big difference between the first one and the second one. And my big difference is this one is pointing down. As I read from left to right, I see that this is starting to point down. So I know that my slope is going to be negative. So I'm going to go ahead and just put a big negative sign right there. So that way I know it's going to be a negative slope because it points down. So now I'm going to once again do the exact same 2 steps that I just did. So I'm going to first identify my perfect points. I can see I've got a perfect point right there. I've got another perfect point there. There's another perfect point there. So that's 1, 2, 3. I've got a 4th one and a 5th one. Looks like this one I also have 5 different perfect pairs. So once again, I can use any of them that I want to. So I'm just going to take first 2 that I see that are really close together. We're going to do these top 2, and I'm going to go ahead and draw my slope triangle. So my slope triangle, once again, I'm going to start with 1 point, and I'm going to go to my next point. So I can see that I'm going to go down and then to the right, and I'm going to draw that slope triangle along that grid line. So now that I've drawn my slope triangle, I'm going to use that slope formula once again. M equals rise over run. And then I just need to figure out what my rise is. So the rise, when I start out at my first point, and I'm going to go ahead and change colors here so we can see this a little bit better. When I start out at my first point, I'm going to start by going down to my next point. So I'm going to go down, and I went down 1, 2, 3 units. And when I'm going down on a graph, I'm going down towards those negative numbers. So instead of it being just 3, I'm going to say my rise is actually -3, because instead of going up like I did in the last one, I went down. Down is negative. So I've got -3. And then my run, the side-to-side movement, I can see that I'm going to continue going, and I just go over 1 unit. And since I went to the right, and that's where all of our positive numbers are, that's a positive 1. So my slope is then -3 over 1. And we always want to make sure that we're simplifying our slope. So I'm going to simplify that, and instead of it being a fraction of -3 over 1, I can just write my slope as -3. So the slope of this line, I'm going to make sure I have that big negative sign that I wrote there before, is -3.